Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations in Courage.
Welcome back.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, just settling in. We've had tech issue after tech issue.
Holy cow.
Y'all, listen, we really wanted to make this podcast happen, and the tech gods really did not want to make it happen. And we are fighting tooth and nail to just get
Here.
this episode out.
You are here.
How are you, honey?
I'm doing great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, how you doing, babe?
You have a new job.
I do.
You just started last week. Do you want to tell the people?
I did. I went back into the cybersecurity space,
Mhm.
still in customer success, working with a just incredible and very diverse team. Probably the first time since I was at GE that we have a team, this diverse. We've got people in Latin America and multiple countries in APAC and obviously Europe and a few people in the US. So
I love that.
fast growing, very cool business and super stoked. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I just I think maybe on some level I've always felt this way since my dad died, but I think now more than ever there really is this energy of like things are so uncertain that you have to go for it. You have to go for your joy. You have to go for your rest. You have to go for, I don't know if this is necessarily your greatest hope and dream for yourself. However, if you're going to work and you are good at what you do, then there has to be this level of working for the best possible business you can, giving it your best of your skill set and your energy, and just like, right? Like, why settle for less than that right now?
I 100% agree with you. And I'll also say, right, then when we think about like the best business,
Yeah.
sometimes it's the best business for you, right? There might be
Right,
other,
right.
right? But I think to your point, and I went through this myself, right? The choice to go for it, so to speak, right,
Mhm.
comes with just a lot of weight. And sometimes the weight has nothing to do with specifically the work that you're doing, but it's the people you work with, it's the sense of loyalty or obligation or anything like that. And I think that really is the cue, right? It doesn't mean that loyalty isn't a trait to be to a trait to be embraced, but sometimes we overweight it a little bit and we hold ourselves back in the process, and then we look around and all the people that we were loyal to are gone, and like we're in a place that we're not meant to be, right? So it's just wild. I think your point is absolutely on point. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely feel in my own little way, right? Of course, or not of course, because people may not know, but you may not know this. I don't make as much money as Mark. So like, smaller scale in terms of um I guess impact to our family because I'm not the breadwinner and I don't carry the health insurance, right? But in terms of empathy and understanding where you're coming from and trying to relate it back to my own experience, even every time I've left a studio job teaching fitness, it is that sense of loyalty that keeps you there much longer than than you want to be there, than what's necessary to be there. And then not loyalty to the business, loyalty to the people who show up,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
you don't want to leave your clients because everyone can't follow you where you're going. You won't keep in touch with everyone, and it's just like, this special moment where the minute you leave, for better or for worse, nothing will ever be the same again.
Right. Yeah, I get.
And that is the struggle, or that has been the struggle for me, which is, it's a stepping into the unknown and trusting that there are more people, more opportunities, more joy, more money, more flexibility, more of what I'm looking for in the next season of my life is like on the other side waiting for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And more impact, I think, in some cases as
Yeah.
well. Like, you know,
Yeah.
not, like we talk in terms of money, right? And financial is always needs to be, you know, part of the equation somewhere. But it is more about impact, right? Whether it's impact to yourself, impact to your family, impact to your time, impact to the world, right? And I think that gets lost. Those moments will never change, right? They're going to hold in time forever, and that's beautiful, right? And it's just a matter of like, what's the next moment, the next moment after that that awaits. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think I really, when I started working for C2, who, we, if you listen to the last episodes with Eliza, we are coworkers, colleagues there. She's been there much longer than I have, but there was this I couldn't believe that I was working for a studio that didn't necessarily, one, need me to do anything as a Black woman other than exist, and two, where I didn't feel like I could never see myself reflected.
Right. Right.
Like,
Right.
like when I already got there, there were instructors, a diverse group of instructors, and the clients are diverse. And it was just like, oh, I just get to exist here.
Yeah.
Right? I just get to, oh my God, there are Black girls doing Pilates. Some of them are in their 20s, some of them are in their 40s and 50s. Oh my God. And I did not, to both of our points of just like trusting what's next, you could not have paid me to believe that I could take a job in the suburbs and find what I have been looking for years. Not just the diversity, but the exhale,
You know,
right?
yeah, and I witnessed that exhale, right, viscerally, right,
Yeah.
when you know you came home from those sessions, and you know, I also think that there's something a little bit more unique and more special when it happens organically,
Yeah.
versus like anyone who is intentionally trying to create more diverse spaces. Like we need more people like that. But when it happens without intention, and when it
Hmm.
just happens right organically, I think there's even something more beautiful and special about that. And it feels like that's what happened there. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so anyway, that's not
yeah,
what the episode is about,
not
but
at all. But it was, you
a
know,
nice little
and
tangent
connected.
update.
But I think that the thread is the episode, right, does connect to wellness and you know and consumption, and like all of that is related. Like the choices that we make about what we consume and the places we put ourselves into, it's all related, right? It
It is all
contributes to our
related.
well-being. So it's all
Right. So to that end, we wanted to explore a little bit this idea of ethical media consumption. And so one of my former clients slash religious scholar slash badass writer, Liz Booker, she she had written this piece on Substack. I hope I'm saying her last name right. It might be Bucar, Bucar. I'm not sure. Liz, if you listen to this, I'm sorry. I'm doing my best. But she wrote this piece on Substack about Liz Gilbert's new memoir, which people are just absolutely ripping to shreds. I'm like, should I read this just to be in on the conversation? But about that and AA and spirituality and religion and God and centering oneself and da 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 da, right? We're not going to talk about Liz's article. What I am going to talk about is when I went into the comment section, there was one comment that I read that was like, or there were two comments that I read. One was talking about sort of missing the point, and the other one was talking about the sort of like role of gender in this whole conversation. And Liz is wonderful, and she's graceful, and just reminded people, right? It's one piece. It's one piece of writing. She cannot possibly explore every angle or every perspective or everything, right? She chose a lane. She drove in that lane. It's a 7-minute read. And then she got off the highway. Like that's it, right? And so I want to remind people that these episodes, and not just of our podcast, but of many podcasts, of many things that you listen to, engage with, if we were to explore every aspect of this topic, you would tune out because it would be
100%.
7 hours long, right? We say we want everything, but we actually don't. Okay. So I just want to remind you that we're going to talk about ethical media consumption, but we're going to pick a lane. We're going to drive in it for a little bit, and then we're going to hop out of that lane because we're also working parents and you're working and have things to do and things to listen to. So that's going to be that. That said, I love how I'm giving rules of engagement. That
Yeah.
said, please, we always welcome the conversation, even when it bristles up against us. So if there's something that as you're listening to any of our episodes, if there's something where you're like, I want to add to this point, send us a DM
Mhm.
on Instagram at CouragePod. You could send us an email. It's listed. We have a joint inbox that we can both engage with. Um, there are ways that you can be a part of the conversation, and we welcome that. But don't be like, y'all missed da da da. Maybe we didn't miss it and we just decided not to say it. Okay. So we're we're moving into a place where I'm moving into a place where, and I think you are too. I have no time for people who cannot think critically and who cannot engage with nuance. Like I'm just actually, I'm starting to set a boundary because I'm tired of the keyboard warriors. I'm tired of the extra noise. I'm tired of the people who just want to argue, who don't want to have a conversation, who just want to argue. I'm tired of the people who, you know, are choosing to just create chaos in the name of social justice or whatever. That is not social justice or religion or whatever it is they claim to be sort of defending. I'm over it. So, this is my one disclaimer. Watch, like no one will listen to this episode and I'll have to repeat it. But I'm going to say going forward, this is how I'm going to be conducting my social media and stuff too. Get out of my DMs, get out of my texts, get out of my email. If you just
That's
want
what
to
I'm going
create
to ask. Right?
chaos,
Like if you have something thoughtful to add, going back to your previous point,
right?
right? Bring
You
them
don't
on.
have to agree with me. I'm actually not looking for an echo chamber.
Yeah.
It's nice. I'll take it. It's regulating.
Yeah.
But, so I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it does tie to this whole episode,
Agree.
right? Because it's about critical thinking and it's also about critical ethical consumption, right? Like
Yeah.
what we put into our minds and our souls is just as important, in terms of what we put into our bodies, right? We can all understand that if you put crap in your body on a daily basis, you're probably not going to be and feel healthy. Yet we don't have the same discernment when it comes to how we consume information. And I think that's just a really interesting data point.
Yeah, I think and I mean, and let's just get into it now, right? But I think that we know that though, but can't stop ourselves. I
Yeah.
think people are recognizing, oh boy, when I scroll too much, I feel like crap afterwards, or I feel bad about my body, my circumstances. I read the news and I feel depressed, or I get angry, or whatever it is, right? I feel despair, hopeless. So I think we recognize when perhaps we've hit our limits,
Yeah.
But we maybe, I'll speak for myself, maybe keep going past those limits in the name of staying informed. And especially, the the left has a reputation for just wanting to be super educated, informed, able to speak about the issues that we care about, right? Which does take a level of time and engagement. And so I can see where maybe we get stuck. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think that is it. I think, look, I think the challenge is being informed is one thing,
Okay.
but I think the way that the media outlets work today, and especially the way that social media works, right, is it feeds you a diet of outrage and algorithms, right? And it's that what keeps you in the loop, right? Because every additional thing might be one additional point that gets you more amped up, or one, separate, example of how that manifests, and it just continues to have you click into the next and the next. You don't have any further information, right? Whatever originally set you off was the same thing that set you off an hour ago, right? You are just choosing to go deeper into the abyss, and I think that's probably the initial call to action for all of us, which is to understand there's a line between being informed and completely going over the edge, and where that line sits is often the difference in terms of your mental and physical health, and still being a good part of the community, and still being able to do what we all need to do to make sure that we can drive change.
Yes. I'm not pausing because I disagree. I'm pausing because I'm also just wondering, as someone who is not a neuroscientist, unfortunately, I do know that what we what we watch when we go into like that spiral, it is hitting up the reward centers in our brains, right? If there was no reward, we would likely stop doing the behavior. So then I'm wondering, what is is there some kind of mechanism to kind of pull you away from the dopamine hits,
Yeah.
right? Because most of us don't necessarily want to be completely offline. Some people definitely do, and they're like, very hard boundaries with social media, and but because many of us get pleasurable things out of it that are not related to the news, community, or you learn a new way to clean your oven or whatever, right? Like these things we want to hold on to, but you're also getting caught up in the things that you shouldn't at the same time, right? And often because of the nature of social media, and I wrote about this, 1 minute you could be watching a video of puppies and you scroll up one time and you're watching a murder, and you scroll up one time and it's a pregnancy announcement, and you scroll up one time and and that part is really hard to reconcile. Um, because I always want to think about, well, what can I give people to do? But I can't even figure this one out for myself other than taking lots of social breaks or knowing that I'm not going to be on more than 10 minutes or 20 minutes or and whatever I've seen, and that's just got to be it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, and it's not easy, right? But I think it's like anything. It's like habits of presence almost, right? We say, oh, we want to be more intentional with, our kid, and not be looking at our phone all the time. And like you have to be intentional. You have to notice it and say, it's time to put the phone down. Like my child is right here. Let me pay attention, or whatever it might be. And it's the same thing here. I mean, I don't think there is any magic formula per se, but I do think it starts with understanding that this is happening, and having, almost like asking yourself the question in the process of consumption, am I learning anything new? Right? Right? Is
What
this,
if you are? What if you are learning something new and it just happens to be, sending you into a spiral of, I learn something new all the time. Am I am I okay after learning it? Sometimes yes. And sometimes I'm texting you being like, Do we need to leave the country? Do we need to, are we okay? Are we, like, that's not the person that I want to be walking around every day.
I think that's it, right? I mean, I do think that part of it is, am I learning something new or is it the same thing over and over again? And then also, like, is what I'm learning, how's it making me feel? And sometimes it's going to be immensely shitty. And
Right.
that is sustained, I think, again, being intentional. You've got to say, like, I need to take a break, right? I need to
Yeah.
go into the domain of, 100% puppies and kitties for a bit. Uh,
Right.
to kind of soothe my soul or go out for a walk or do whatever it is. But there has to be some intentionality because like the reality of news today is it's meant to keep you engaged, right? Attention is the currency right
Right.
now, right? And everyone's vying for it. And once they get it, they don't want to give it up. And we
Right.
are all just willing participants in that circle, right? It's almost like, gambling. There's a way to keep you at the table.
Right.
And it's no different with how people, drive media right now. So I think that is it. And it has to start with understanding what's happening and building a practice, building some type of habit to pull you away and to create some balance, like truly, like I have news feeds that you do too, that are non-controversial, right? That
Yeah, it's not pleasant,
right, yeah,
but it's not designed to necessarily ruin my life
correct,
either or
right.
ruin my day.
Truly meant to inform. I think back to like when my dad would get right the paper every day, especially the Sunday paper. I could always tell kind of what space he was in based
Hmm.
on where he started. I mean, there were times on a Sunday morning my dad would pull out the comic section first, and that's where he would start. And sometimes he would look at the headlines, and sometimes he would go into the opinion, or sometimes he'd start with sports. But it was almost like I could understand what place my dad was in based on where he started, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
I do think of all the people who are like, you know, must be nice to take a break from the news because XYZ identity lives it. So, I I always think about these things because I'm always thinking about, and I think many of us are, especially our listeners, our circle, always thinking about what it means to be a good person and what it means to be engaged and what it means to be taking care of each other and, empathetic and kind of all the things that we think about in terms of dialing into our humanity. And I think about what that means for me as a Black woman and the engagement that I want from people.
Yeah,
Because I am also one of those identities who cannot escape the fact that I am woman and that my skin is brown. And that, you know, a part of my being able to survive and thrive does depend on people who both look like me and who don't look like me, wanting to create equity and equality and sort of anti-oppression, anti-colonialism practices and laws. And the best that I can come up with right now, and this may change, is that I do want people engaged and I do want people making decisions with all of us in mind. But I'm also realistic and I know that people, all of us, we have several things happening at once all of the time. And so when I want people's engagement, I also want them to really be able to engage. And I want them to want to engage because that's where I'm going to get their best, right? So if that means you take a break from social media or you take a break from the news, and that's what allows you to come back and be able to hold space for difference and be able to hold space for experiences that are not yours and be able to donate or be able to attend a town hall or be whatever it is, I'll take that over someone's exhaustion and their resentment and their, thinking that they just have to do this in order to get, you know, community points or whatever it is. And this kind of goes along with my disclaimer in the beginning of the podcast. I've been spending a lot of time just kind of like watching human behavior and feeling like some of our expectations for each other are just not fucking fair because they don't align with how human behavior works, as I understand it. That is not to say that there are not dire things happening. And we also know that you cannot force people to do what they don't want to do. That shame and yelling at people and making them feel awful about themselves or, making them feel awful for the fact that they, you know, live in safety or have a job or, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't get anyone on your side. And a lot of the times it doesn't make any sense because sometimes where we end up is kind of like a product of being shuffled along by who raised us.
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
in the same way that I couldn't choose to live in this body, right? This is how I was born. But also, it's kind of like there was no way, right? In my household growing up, I wasn't going to be a good student, a good reader, a good athlete, a go at a college, right? They shuffled me through that. It would have happened whether I was kicking or screaming or not, okay? And so for anyone to look at me and be like, oh, well, it must be nice to be able to take a break and go to Target or whatever, it's kind of like it's I understand. And also I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, I'm just living my life here. So do you want my engagement? Do you want my attention? Or do you want me to go fuck myself?
Right, right,
Do you
right.
understand what I'm saying? Does this make sense?
Does make sense. I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like we all want to be, you know, kind of good members of the community, good friends, good partners, good whatever. But we need to be able to keep ourselves well enough to care, right?
Yes.
To be able to keep ourselves well enough to make change, to influence, right? To connect. Because if all you're doing is living in the abyss, then that is all what you're going to reflect, right? And we all become mirrors to the
Right.
energy around us, right? And I'm
Right.
not saying there are some things that literally need kind of visceral attention. And oftentimes those things are just because of lack of people even understanding what is out there, and people need to kind of rise up to educate the cause. But to your point, maybe I'll make one change here. You said that you can't force people to do things that they don't want to do. The challenge is you can, right? It's what happens in our country. And I think like what happens when you force people to do what they don't want to do, it's resentment, right? It creates this energy, and depending on who you are, you're either self-silencing, right,
Mhm.
which is an impact, which is not healthy for you or
Right.
those around you, or you're blowing up on the internet, right, or in other places, right,
Mhm.
and that's not healthy either, right. So really understanding that it is a little bit of a balance in an ecosystem, understanding that what we consume, what we create space for, it's all meant to keep ourselves, right, kind of better humans almost. And I think the thing that gets lost when we think about critical thinking. I think the other side of that is critical questioning, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
being curious. It's asking the question with people that you don't necessarily agree with. I mean, I
It's
think
hard to do, man.
it's
You know,
wicked hard to
sometimes
do.
people are like, I've been in this situation where sometimes people are incredibly offended by your curiosity, no matter how respectful you're being, right? I guess let let me just say that I guess the sort of the reason why we turn this over and the reason why we're having this conversation is because there is no clear, easy answer, right? Because somebody is going to be grateful that you asked the question, that you care about who they are and where they come from. And the next person is going to be like, how dare you? How dare you not know? How dare you not go read it in a book? How dare you make me talk about my identity or whatever it is? Like, and this is the hard part about getting engagement and getting buy-in and being in community
Right.
because you don't know who you're about to bump up against and what you're going to get. And this is why we're sort of talking about it in a part because we're normalizing how frustrating this can be.
Yeah, like it's immensely frustrating. And like I mean, I'll give you an example of something that I do, which also causes frustration, but it also, I think, it informs me in a way where I can have better discussions, with those that I may not agree with. And it is whatever point I might have, whether it might be, the daily news feed or even situations at work. If I find myself getting immensely emotional, right, viscerally reactionary to some event, I will go and seek out a counterpoint article. And reading the article, right, or looking at whatever blog post is out there, whatever it might be, it can also, right, really impact me. But in doing so, I actually get to understand the logic in many cases, right? Where it's not just people waking up every day being evil. Those people are out there, right?
Right.
But often it is purely a matter of misinformation, of misconsumption, right? The same thing we're talking about. I would say 70% of the country doesn't do that, right? They will look at the outlets that confirm their own position, right? Versus trying to at least understand the counterpoints so that if you're looking to influence change, you have something to anchor to, right? You have a place where you can ask a question without being disrespectful because you have a little bit better understanding of what is driving their perspective.
Because everyone thinks they're right.
Of course.
That's the main thing, right? Both sides are kind of doing the same thing, is saying, both sides are saying, I'm actually the defender of democracy, right? So what do you do
100% correct.
when both sides absolutely believe that they have the correct answer, right? That is certainly the challenge, and I do think to your point that it is imperative that we try to understand, especially after reading uh Todd Rose's or listening to Todd Rose's research a little bit on the Mel Robbins podcast, knowing that most of us want and value the same things. It's just the pathways to getting there are where we disagree.
Mhm.
And so that's interesting because you can work with that,
Mhm.
right? And that's what you're saying, just by perhaps engaging with sources that you wouldn't normally engage with and learning the sort of like psychology, like behavioral psychology of, quote, the other side will help you to understand their logic or to help you dial into empathy or to help you strategize with what your action steps might be. Like it doesn't have to be this like sort of like moral values based thing. It could literally be I'm going to read about what they care about, so I better know how to get my point across. Right? It can be that.
Yeah, it
It could
definitely
be a
can.
tactic of war, baby. Like,
And that, I think that is, a foundational question that we need to all ask ourselves. especially if we are trying to impact change in any way, shape, or form. And again, we can talk about like things that are going on in the country. We can talk about things that are going on in work. We can talk about things that are going on in our household, right? I mean, I remember when I had taken an op-ed, right, course
Mhm.
once. I wrote this opinion piece, and the editor that reviewed it provided immensely great feedback to me. And then she also said, right, understand that what you're trying to do, I think, is to shape hearts and minds, right? To get people to think differently. And what you're really doing is speaking to the exact same audience that you're in. So you're validating all their points. But if anyone were to read your piece outside of that, you've given them nothing, right, to see themselves in. So if you're looking to influence change, understand that. And I like it, it sat with me. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and ask, literally ask you, but also ask our listeners to consider, how do we learn?
Hmm.
Because I think it's important to investigate kind of our own, do I want to call it value system or process, maybe? Are you someone who learns better by listening, by watching, by reading, by conversation, by, right? What is the, you know, I think I think that could be one way to disrupt this idea of thinking that the only way you can stay informed is through kind of like um, pathways that might feel dysregulating or right. So for you, Mark, because I know the best way you learn is not scrolling through social media. So how do you best take in information?
Yeah, so I'm not going to be a great like a great example of this, but I'll explain how I do learn.
Hmm.
Right? So it typically will start out with something. So I love reading, but as you know, there are some books I will read, front to back. There
Hmm.
are other books that I literally will stop on page three because it makes me think about something which
Hmm.
I want to do more discovery in. And at that point, I will find another book which goes deeper there. And then I might listen to a podcast about it, right? I might watch something on it. But the way I learn is to kind of have as much depth about whatever the thing that I'm trying to learn about it gives me, and as much perspectives and in
Okay.
as much different mediums, right? So if I can listen and I can read and I can even introspect, right, about
Hmm.
it in my my own time, it helps formulate, at least from my perspective, a better view, right? It sits with me a lot more authentic on what's the right word?
Authentically. What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Than it would otherwise, right? So like that's my pathway to learning. But I think your question is a question that everyone should ask for themselves. Like when they really think about what are the moments when they learn the most, when
Best.
they feel
Yeah.
best about the learning process, what does that feel like? And you know, like again, it could be you read something and then you take a walk and just think about it.
Right.
Yeah,
I think it's important to know and so you're basically saying that you go topic by topic
yeah.
when you're learning. And then what do you do in order to is that so then seeking out sort of alternative perspectives, is that just a part of the process then?
Yeah, to me it is, but I'll probably add one more, step to it. I think the thing that also needs to be considered, quite frankly, by everyone, but it's something that I do a lot of, is I actively seek out, right? So there's a process of taking in and there's a process of seeking out. And I try to look for intersections in as many places as possible, right? Because if there's a topic, it's very rare that topic is going to exist in any
Yeah.
type of vacuum, right? It will relate to something else in life. And sometimes you can find them, and sometimes those lessons find us. But the moments where you can draw a connection, right? Not only does it add clarity, but I'm sure of it, right? Not being a neuroscience myself either, I know, right? It generates new neural pathways, right? And I think that's the thing that If we stay stuck in the same consumption cycle, there's no new pathways being driven, right? The cars are all driving down the exact same road at the same time. And at some point in time, there's going to be a jam, right? You've got to create right, new avenues.
Yeah. What that also makes me think is hmm, this is also, I guess, how one way that you could cultivate critical thinking skills as well, right? To me, it is that making those connections or seeing connections between things that don't seem to be connected on the surface, or just asking yourself, like, what's like this? Or, how could someone think this way? Or what would someone have to experience in order to then make this choice or that choice, right? I do think you are engaging a different part of your brain. And then also, I think that that could really help disrupt this cycle of mindless consumption. Because if you know how you learn best, and maybe even more so if you actually love learning, which you do, which I do, time is limited, right? So I have to make some choices. Am I going to sit on my phone, or am I going to sort of elevate my thinking, or try to create new neural pathways, or try to figure out sort of where I fit, where my activism fits, where my humanity fits in this, you know, in
Yep.
this current landscape,
Yep.
right? And also as parents, how does what I know and what I'm learning affect now the choices that I'm making that help shape someone else's life? And
100.
also, even further, what is that little kid seeing me do, right? Because if this kid sees, all this kid sees is I'm on a device, because it kind of doesn't matter what you're doing, really,
Yep.
right? They're just seeing that, like, this is the behavior that my parent mostly employs. But if they're seeing that, which Zion does, sometimes we're on computers, sometimes we're on our phones, sometimes we're reading books, sometimes we're working out, sometimes we're going for walks, sometimes we're, right? Like, and a lot of times he does follow that sort of pattern,
Yep.
right? He's really great at turning his iPad off himself. He's
Yeah.
really great at watching
Surprisingly so.
something
Exactly.
and being like, I'm done. He's
Yeah.
really great at moving from task to task, sort of his own volition. And I think it's because we do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He also stands up and walks around while he eats, which drives me nuts. But what do you and I do? We stand up in the kitchen, we eat at the counter, we're eating on the couch, right? Like, so if for no other reason too, it's like because the young people, if you have them in your lives, are watching what you're doing and you're showing them what's important. So if you're only ever doing one thing or two things or whatever, then that's what they're going to emulate.
So 100% true. And I'll also say this. I think clearly, right, young people can be influenced way faster in those situations. But I'll also say, look, we're all role models on a daily basis, and even
Totally.
adults, right, will
Totally.
watch what they, especially like if you are somebody who is loved by somebody, if you are somebody who is respected, right, in your community,
Hmm.
in your work, like people will watch your
They
behavior
do.
and they
They do.
will at some level mimic it, right? So like we all need to have that obligation. If we bring this all the way back again, right? How we show up on a daily basis matters. And we can't show up at our best if we're just feeding ourselves a diet of outrage on a
Yeah.
daily basis, right? Uninformed outrage. And I'll also like the analogy that as you were talking, right? That also came into my mind in terms of how like we learn. I would also I would also say this. I think that more often than any place in our lives,
Mhm.
right, the learning process when it comes to news, especially, is almost like speed dating, right? Like all you're seeing is all of these provocative headlines, right?
That's
The
interesting.
issue is we never take any of them on like a third date, right? Like we're very shallow and we react to that shallowness and all we see is this much, right? But we know that on any topic, on any idea, there's typically a lot more right under the tip of the iceberg, right? So
Yeah.
anyway.
I know. I think that's such an interesting analogy, but I love you. Love how your brain works. I'm gonna go back one more time before we go forward because I know we're starting to near our time. But I asked how we learn,
Mhm.
and now I'm gonna ask how we synthesize.
Hmm.
So let's just go back to you because you gave us this incredible example of you kind of literally do everything to learn. You're hitting up every source and resource. So now how do you make it all make sense? How do you go from taking in to then alchemizing to then action?
Yeah, I think so. The process of alchemizing, at least for me, once you kind of take everything in, I think this is where your own personal beliefs and values and everything kind of,
Mhm.
butt up against it, right? It's like, okay, this is the body of work. Based on this, given everything that I've now digested, right? What do I believe is true, right? Because there isn't typically no one part that's true. There's multiple parts that are true. And how does that effectively sit with me? And then how can that inform how I can show up differently, tomorrow, right? So going back to our point about, if I have somebody, work is probably an easier place to do this because if we talk about politics, it can go right a bazillion different ways. But when I think about work, if there is a position or somebody that I have viscerally, right, disagreed with for a long time, and I reach a point where I know, right, that is not feeding me or moving the process forward. So I go in and I try to learn and I sit down and I empathize and I have a conversation and I read what they wrote and all that kind of stuff. And I now have a different perspective. And I'm like, okay, like I still believe that what I stood for is true. And I believe the values that stand behind that are still the values that we need to show up with. But I also understand what is driving this behavior. So tomorrow, if I'm in a space where that particular individual is, or others that think like that particular individual, I'm going to show up differently, right? I am going to use words. I'm going to use tone. I'm going to call out concerns that will resonate with them, right? So I have a place of meeting them, and that's
Mm,
just one way, right? That I'll kind of synthesize it and then put it into action. But like, it's not like it's just digestible. If I was to equate this to martial arts, right, for a minute, you're on the mat and you're taught these techniques and you read them in a book and you kind of watch a video and you can see all of this stuff, but it really doesn't get synthesized, right, until you do, right, until
mm,
you feel, until it becomes tactical and tactile. um, and I think it's the same thing for new ideas, right? You need to actually put it into practice,
yeah.
and when you're putting into practice things that have a different point of view, I think the balance is, again, what is true, what sits with your values. You can't lose that. But now you have like a new anchor you could throw out to maybe right connect with someone or an idea in a way that you didn't before and bring that person, a little bit closer in.
Mm.
How about yourself?
There are certain things that, where the action is interpersonal, but there are other things that I learned that I can't quite do anything with, but I think it just informs, I think the overall maybe kind of reminder of I am not the center of the universe.
You are center of my universe, but
I can be I love being the center of your universe, but I'm not the center of everyone else's. Okay. Unfortunately, or actually, fortunately, I'm not even interested. But, but to be reminded of both how big and how small I am, sometimes that's what I learn, right? That there's a whole world before I was even a thought, and there will be a whole world after I am gone.
yep. Yep. And the challenges that we're facing now, it's really easy, right, for all of us to get lost in them. And there are some really tough challenges. And
Listen,
go back to any,
my ancestors were fucking enslaved, okay? I'm chilling. I'm chilling, right? It doesn't mean that I don't face anything, but like
yeah.
my ancestors were enslaved in this country. I could drive my car, right, to where they were held in bondage. That has to mean something.
Yeah.
It also it makes me grateful, and it also puts things in perspective when I can remember,
Mhm.
but it also galvanizes me
Mhm.
to be like, just based on chattel slavery alone, it's a really good chance that I wouldn't even be here,
Yeah.
right? Somebody had to survive in order for me to even be doing this podcast right now. Do you know how huge that is?
I mean,
Right?
that's the perspective, right? And I
But
think it,
so also like I'm invested in this work in part because I feel like it is a duty to be one of the people figuring this out. I don't want to spend my life arguing with people about who has value and who doesn't. What a waste.
right.
What a waste. I also don't want to spend my life pissed off because of social media. What?
Yep.
Hey, you and I didn't even grow up with this. This is relatively new for us. And to be so sort of like run over by something so meaningless at the end of the day. Well, the cat is sneezing. Um, oh
Uh,
my Lord. Do you hear him?
I do now. Yeah.
Okay, well, he sounds like a smoker. To be so run over by something that's so meaningless is crazy to me. I'm actively working on it, right? But another way that I synthesize and turn to action is sometimes remembering, right, the pause between reaction and response.
Mhm. Yep.
Sometimes what I learn is slow down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes what I learn is everything actually doesn't need my attention right now,
Mhm.
right? So like, I everybody knows I'm a big journaler. Everyone knows I'm a big talker. I synthesize by doing both of those things. I turn things over in my head. But I
Yeah.
will say I've been feeling more and more recently like it's really it's harder to talk to people
Yeah.
outside of you, you know?
Yeah.
I think you're really bad at taking feedback on your own behavior, but you're really good at kicking around ideas that have kind of nothing to do with you.
I'll own that.
You're my synthesizing person because there's very little that offends you or that you can't turn over in your mind, right? And I think in some ways you appreciate the challenge when it's something way the fuck out there that you have to turn over.
Yep.
And I'm finding that like it's hard to do that with people. And I wish I could do that with more people. And maybe just by putting this intention out there, right? The people that I'm looking for will find me. It's not that they don't exist. It's not like I can't talk to anyone. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that like I used to feel like I could converse a little bit more easily than I can now because now I feel like I'm watching out for landmines, right?
Yes.
And that part that worries me a little bit
Mhm.
because it means that we're all missing out.
Mhm.
It also means I'm holding myself back, which I don't like to do. Um, and it also means like what kind of world am I participating in that my kid's going to grow up in? That like if I feel like if I feel like I can't engage with the community at large in a way that is smart and responsible, then like what world am I leaving behind? And that
Yeah,
scares me.
yeah, no, I think it scares me too. And, I think your point about, uh, taking a pause is, I think, immensely, immensely important because it does create space for thought and dialogue. And when I think about like the world right now, it feels like what happened is the pace of information outpaced our evolution, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And, again, going back to the newspaper thing, there was shit going on all around the world, right, when I was growing up. And because of the way that news happened, there was a space between when you consumed it and when
Hmm.
you did, right? It wasn't constant.
Yeah.
It was on the evening news and it was in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And at the conversation at the dinner table or at the local bar, and there was typically space to introspect and to have dialogue. And right now there's no space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if there's one thing we need to understand and then leave behind is like how do we normalize that process of intentionally, because that the feed is not going to change. What
Yeah.
we do with the feed is what we have control of.
Right.
Right. So
So we have four action steps
okay.
that we fought for this episode because we were like, listen, we can't just be talking and leave people with
Yes. Yeah.
nothing that they can grasp onto other than our little banter. Okay. So like we so I'll do the first one.
Sure.
Your challenge is to engage with the news outside of social media.
Mm-hmm.
If you're already doing this, you're ahead of the game. Great.
Mm-hmm.
My personal challenge for you would be to actually, you know, go into your browser and actually put in a website, right? And engage with the news that way. But then the second piece of that challenge is to find a credible counter source. I subscribe to it's not necessarily source counter source per se, but I subscribe to a news digest, a daily digest called The Conversation, right? Isn't it The Conversation?
Yeah.
Um, I recommend. It's um, because I'm getting important news in digest form, um, and it um, what do I want to say? And it like keeps me informed without the urgency and without the sort of like crash on my nervous system. Now, I do read things that scare me. I do read things that freak me out. I do read things that I wish I wasn't reading. But I'm also like not watching someone get murdered when I open my phone, right? It's a big difference. I'm also not taking in, you know, 50 different hot takes about a subject. I've realized for myself that sometimes it's not the news itself or the headline itself that spirals me. It's take after take after take after take after take. It's person after person online being like, well, you're a piece of shit if you don't know this. And you're like, sometimes it's that that spirals me. So
Yeah.
I want you to engage with news outside of social, and I want you to find some kind of credible counter source to sort of brush up against and see what alchemizes from that. See what happens.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And and I think a lot of I think a good cue is independent news outlets, right?
Yeah.
Some of the big outlets now are very sensationalized and very partisan in many cases, right? So I do think these independent outlets, and I love, even though things like NPR tend to be leaning a little bit one way, like they will have guests and engage in dialogue that are definitely counterpoints. So I think that's a great one. I mean, I think the second point is to kind of do like do happy shit. Like if you're going to consume information, consume stuff that is, I don't want to say completely mindless because I'm not sure, but like stuff that is going to feed you in a way that isn't controversial, right?
You need that sometimes.
Definitely need that, right? It's stupid, but ever since I've been a kid, right, I wanted to be a zoologist once. I think I've talked about this once, right? So I love animals, right? So I will just read articles or kind of watch a feed about animal evolution and how they actually form communities beyond our comprehension, like just stuff that
Yeah.
will that is not controversial. And I think you need that, right, to keep you whole.
Yeah. I mean, don't lie to the people. We are also watching Love is Blind, and we are also watching Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders right now. That is also our stupid happy shit.
Absolutely. Look, Michelle Obama
And
has talked about her
you
love
always
for
say that.
reality
You're like, if
reality
Michelle
shows.
Obama can watch reality TV, then I can too.
I just put it out there.
But I love that Michelle Obama is like your beacon
It
of
is.
behavior.
It is.
That makes me so happy. Okay, the third thing would be to remember that like we are not victims,
Yeah.
okay, by and large, right? Like we have power, we have choices.
Yeah.
And in talking about my ancestors, you have to remember that we all have to remember, not you, but we all have to remember that sometimes we are never going to see the change or the progress that we are fighting for, that we are sacrificing for.
Yes.
And I think that because we experience the world as being so fast and convenient, that we also think that our activism will have an immediate impact. Sometimes it does, right? Sometimes you donate $50 to Dignity Matters, and then a girl has period products at school for the entire school year. Sometimes it is that direct.
Right.
And other times it is not. Other times it is, legislation takes years. Sometimes it is not in your lifetime. Sometimes it is, you know, it is compromising. And so you don't maybe get the full thing you want, but you get a little piece and then you keep going. And so the reminder is to like ride the wave and the seasons of change because the more we try to force, I think the more it's going to be disappointing when we don't see an immediate result. So we keep going, right? We keep going, but we find the sort of ebb and flow of it maybe a little bit better than
Yeah.
sometimes we do,
Yeah.
myself included.
Yeah. 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 I think that's absolutely a
Yeah.
true statement. And I think it is about, in some cases, just planting seeds and understanding that they truly are seeds. They're going to have to be nurtured, and you might not see, right, that seed sprout or whatever, but understand that, if you spread 10 seeds, eight might not happen, but two are going to come to fruition at some point in time. And it's hard, right? But I think that's really good advice. And then the last one is to find your way back to community. I mean, we live this, right? Especially when we have our Courage Campaign events, the organic community that was formed and how that makes you feel can't be replaced. But it doesn't necessarily just have to, happen there. It can happen anywhere, right? You can find community in your work life as well. And like just a simple data point, like when in my previous job, something I haven't felt in a long time, right? Since I was at GE, is the local feeling of being in an office, right? We had this little office and people showed up every day. And, you know, between meetings, you are typically talking about things that are not work related, right? You're seeing each other as humans, and being
Yeah.
able to do that is meaningful. And we move
Yeah.
at such a fast pace that, sometimes it gets lost. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think just too like another thing, especially as we continue to like shop online or shop at like bigger stores or chain stores or big box stores and stuff like that, we also lose this seeing the same people over and over again, right? And so when you can go to a local coffee shop, when you can go patron a small business, right? Every time we go to Emerald City Plants,
Yes.
which, like we're not buying plants super often, right? Our space is not huge, but I would say once a quarter, we
Yeah.
probably pop into there. They always remember us.
Mhm.
They remember Zion, right? Like I was breastfeeding him on the couch in the plant shop in
Yes.
2021 when we started going. I get hugs, there's conversation. Like that is community in real life, right? The coffee shop that I go to where they're like, Ashley, right?
Uh,
That means something to
I,
me.
yes, I'm so glad you brought those things up, because all of those moments, right, are it's evidence of why we need to all remain hopeful and put our best self out there. And I'll go one step further, going back to your previous point. Sometimes what we put out is not going to be seen or felt, but it's just as meaningful. And they're two subtle and maybe not so subtle examples, right? One are the little, the little portable libraries that are on the street that
Oh,
people
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
randomly feel. Like, how do you feel when you walk by there and one day it's empty and the next day it's filled, right?
Exactly.
It is absolutely
Someone
activating.
cares. Someone
Or
cares.
our local library. Like I saw it for the first time the last time I went, and there's just a section of the library that is basically just free, and it's period products, it's Narcan, right? It's things that like tell the people going in there that we see you, and this is all free if you need it, right? No one is monitoring it, no one is receiving the accolades, but you're putting out something that is creating a more hopeful place, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. Hmm. Well, I guess that's it for this week. As if that wasn't enough. All we
yeah.
got. That's all we got. I mean, we had more in our notes, but we'll spare you this time. We'll just
More in our notes.
we'll let it go. Um, Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Please rate,
Yeah.
review, share, hit us up, all of the things. It not only allows us to feel really warm and fuzzy that people actually listen, but every time, it's an algorithm. So every time you review or elevate this podcast, it makes it easier for other people to find it as well. Um, and we thank you for sharing your time with us. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you in a couple weeks.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.